Hello, and welcome to the Fireside chat of our Employee Experience event. Thank you for being here with us. Today we're going to be talking about the future of frictionless working and what that means, and how businesses can come out stronger from this crisis that's been brought about by COVID. I'd like to introduce the speakers we have with us here today. Elie Girard, CEO at Atos.
Hello.
We've also got Tsedal Neely, who's a professor at Harvard Business School and also author of this recently published book, Remote Work Revolution, Succeeding from Anywhere. I'd like to also welcome Steve Krouskos, who is EY Global Managing Partner and responsible for EY services and business functions across the globe. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's true to say that COVID has been a trigger to change the way we work. And going back to the office now is really just the first step. Businesses have the opportunity to go beyond and really change and transform culture permanently. To prepare for this session, we've put together a list of questions that you, our audience, said you wanted answers to the most. So we're going to look at answering those. But if you have any questions, please do write them in the Q&A box, and our experts will be working behind the scenes to answer these. They'll be here throughout the event today. So I'd like to start off by asking Elie, what have you learnt from the pandemic that you consider most important right now for shaping the future?
Thank you, Laura. And hello, everybody. I would like to start by thanking very much Tsedal and Steve for joining us for this very special event for Atos today. So thank you very much for being with us today. To your question, gosh, I think we learned a lot during the pandemic, and we will continue to learn in the next weeks and months, I'm sure, as we're getting out progressively, hopefully, from the restrictions. But maybe one thing I would like to bring forward and that we learned is really the meaning, as leaders of our companies, the meaning of the word engagement. We learned that our people have to be and can be really engaged into their company. And this is really what matters. This is really what matters. I mean, this word engagement, we used it before, but I think more than ever, we really understood what it meant. For Atos, for example, in the middle of the crisis, our people managed to move from work from office to work from home in a few hours, maximum 2 days, in all the countries in the world. That was very, very impressive. That's engagement. We can't do that without engagement. Towards our customers, in some instances, we managed to ramp up 1,000 resources in some state in the US have in mind in only a few days because they had emergency needs. So our people voluntarily applied to help the customer. 1,000 people. So this is really engagement. So we learned a lot, but I wanted to concentrate on that. One figure which I think is interesting is when your people feel 4.6 times more engaged if they feel heard and listened to. And so I think this is another learning from this crisis.
It's true that engagement's really important, especially when we're all working from home. And it seems now that businesses are really keen to return back to the office. So question for you, Tsedal, how can we use back to the office as a trigger to relaunch?
So first of all, thank you, Laura, for the question. Elie, Steve, it's fabulous to be with you today. What a treat. I think the last 13 months or so has completely transformed individuals' perception of work, of connection, of engagement, and organizations overall. And so the important thing when we return to the office, no matter what the structure is, people are talking about hybrid structures, which will be a mix of remote, and in person. And so it's important to set new norms, to set new understanding of our shared goals, and figure out how are we going to work effectively using digital tools that are available to us so that everyone can continue to contribute no matter where they're located.
It's true. We need to find new ways to connect us. That's key, really key. Steve, question for you now. What are you doing at EY to reimagine the concept of work and also to help your customers?
Oh, that's a great question, and one I could probably spend the whole rest of the session on, but I'll try to cut it. I'll try to make it brief. Look, we much like Elie, I think we were, I won't say surprised, but we were certainly impressed with the way our employees stayed engaged in the early stages of the pandemic and how we got 300,000 people working remotely in less than a week. And serving our clients and no breakdowns and all of that. On reflection, though, did we really provide the best experience to our people? Were we really equipped to think about, our people actually viewing the firm through these technology portals that we have, through the virtual lens, right? And think about it. We've hired 40,000 people that have never stepped inside an EY office yet. So it's been really critical that we, applaud the engagement, and our engagement scores actually improved during the pandemic, which was amazing to us. But I think, for good reasons, we did a lot of the right things. But now we've got to double down on really improving our employee experience, so that translates in through the customer experience. And so more frictionless working with technology, and some of the things we're doing with Elie and Atos around service experience will be helping us in the future, for example. More frictionless experience around our talent and HR function, and procurement, and on and on and on, so that, our people are enabled and empowered and ready, right, to go out and do everything that's necessary for our customers. So that's a big focus that we have over the next several months. In fact, we spent 90 minutes at a board meeting last week talking about this topic of employee experience and how we ramp it up, and what our plans will be over the next several months to ensure that, that we're coming out of the post-pandemic world much more prepared for this hybrid work type of experience.
Might I add something around this engagement question? There's actually 30 years worth of research that shows that when people have flexibility and autonomy and what remote work has offered, job satisfaction, engagement, and productivity goes up. So it's not very surprising that we're hearing both from Elie and Steve that we've seen an increase in engagement. And I think now the question is, how do we retain the parts that are excellent around the autonomy and flexibility that people value so much, but also onboard 40,000 people to our culture? That's the big thing, Steve, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this has been the trickiest, pieces to try to figure out what is the right formula going forward, right? And we've tried to not be too prescriptive. We've told our people is to, make the right decisions. It's your judgment as to what time you should be spending on site with clients, what time you should be spending in EY main offices, what time you should be spending in satellite offices, and what time you should be spending at home. We don't want to prescribe that. We'll give loose guidelines, and they'll be different by country. But, it's clear that if we try to pull everybody back into a scenario where they're in the office 4 days a week or 5 days a week, that won't be the right answer for a talent marketplace that is very, very competitive. We all know how competitive it is right now. I mean, the next 12, 24 months will be the most competitive talent marketplace we've seen in our careers.
I think if I can add, I can jump on that. I think engagement will go with empowerment. We talked a lot about engagement, but as Tsedal and Steve just said, about not being too prescriptive and making sure our employees, take the right decision for the way they consider they will work the best for themselves, for the company. They will contribute the best. I think we need to empower them, and that's really a key. And from a technological perspective, this also has a counterpart or tools that can accompany this. We're talking more and more about low code and no code applications. I think our people, non-technical people, business people, will be able more and more to build their own application landscape thanks to those low code and no code applications. So the technologies will support the empowerment and therefore the engagement. But I think that's also key in what the technologies and what Atos in particular will bring in this rebound after the crisis.
And just to add as well, also other aspects that organizations have been focusing on, which, focused on before, but which are now different, things like leadership and mental health and having a sense of purpose. So just going back to Tsedal, I know that you've focused a lot on distributed and remote teams in your work. What would you say organizations need to do to succeed today and in the near future too?
It's interesting because I love the framework that we've already started to talk about, this idea of engagement, empowerment, and I would add trust to that, right? When trusting people that they will give us the outcome that they need, and trusting that they will undertake the process that will get them there. In terms of purpose, my goodness, we have learned, especially in the last couple of years, that has come into sharp relief in the last year, is that purpose is so important, particularly to our millennials. We see this not only in our own MBA students at the Harvard Business School. They need and crave purpose when they look for employment, and when they join organizations, people want to contribute. I think there's been a sea of change where we've been in the middle of a global pandemic. Many people have experienced loss and grief and shifts and changes to their lifestyle. So this idea of a purpose-driven environment is very attractive. There are many incredibly talented people that I've worked with in organizations and even at Harvard who say, in the absence of purpose, they have no interest in joining an organization. That's where we are today.
I think that's absolutely right. That's it all. And, without our purpose of building a better working world, a few years back, it had so much impact on the recruiting market and on our people. And I think the pandemic just really amplified it because it made people, really see it in real terms. And they could see the kinds of things we were doing, helping countries with relief programs and helping with vaccination programs and so on. So I absolutely agree with you.
And people want to contribute.
And they
do.
I don't know if you share that, but what we have observed in this period, when recruiting people, indeed, exactly as Steve said, in a very peculiar way, because we had to recruit them remotely for most of them. But it was very interesting to see that two topics really were raised during the interviews, both around purpose, both, fully integrated into the purpose. Number one, they wanted to know exactly how they are going to work. What are the modalities of work? And that's part of the purpose, I believe. How is my potential new company is thinking of how I can contribute as an individual to the company. And this is where, engagement, empowerment, trust, everything we've said was counting a lot and is counting a lot and will count even more. But there is a second topic, which is, it's very interesting in this period of pandemic that has raised, even if it's not directly linked, is the decarbonization topic. The people who've been recruiting have raised more and more questions. 10 years ago, when I started working, probably we were not, as applicants, we were not asking questions. Now, candidates are asking questions. They are selecting the companies, and exactly as Steve said, we're entering into a period. The next 12 months are going to be an incredible talent war. And so those second set of questions were about decarbonization. And that's about purpose. What are you really doing to decarbonize? What are you really doing as a contribution to decarbonizing planet? And of course, as a technology company and as we have put as our ambition, and we built a business line ourselves at Atos, we're very proud to be able to leverage on that. But these two things, I think, have been really in the foreground, in the forefront of the pandemic while recruiting.
I mean, I'll tell you a funny story, Elie. I chair our corporate social responsibility subcommittee of the board, and one of our three pillars for our CSR program is sustainability and the environment, decarbonization. And as we were putting together our new strategy at EY 2 years ago under Carmine DeCibio, our current chair, we talked about decarbonization. Should that be one of the primary features of the new strategy? And we debated it. We said, we're not sure. We're not a manufacturing company. We're a professional services company. And then we went out and did a bunch of focus groups with our employees and our clients. And I can't tell you how overwhelming the feedback was about the importance of the environment and decarbonization, even for a firm like ours, where, of course, travel footprint is a big deal. And, as we looked at this pre-pandemic, we set some very aggressive targets, right, which was a 35% reduction in overall carbon footprint, 50% reduction on internal travel, et cetera. And we thought about how are we going to do this? How are we going to change our norms? And frankly, the pandemic really helped us adjust our thinking and realize that, if you were doing something face-to-face 4 times a year, you might be able to just do it face-to-face 2 times a year. So I think the pandemic has really helped open our eyes to how we can achieve some of the decarbonization goals.
Absolutely. And talking about empowerment, I think we can empower our employees to reduce their own carbon footprint. Through choosing the right device, giving them more choice on for choosing the device, on recycling the device, extending the lifetime of the devices, all the circular computing themes, choosing the devices which are less energy consumers, etc., etc. So I think we can empower our people on decarbonization as well.
You started, Elie, by talking about the modality of work being important for people as well. This is another place where I see decarbonization working. When we talk, and in the last year, we've talked to so many companies and so many people and so many individuals, people who say, not doing this commute to work every day, an hour one way, an hour back, has been life-changing. Right. So when we reduce commutes, there's also a lot that we do for the environment, but the work modality is also about our lifestyle. It's starting to look at employees as full people in the context of the work that they do. And I think this is going to be really important as we think about the future of work, really looking at the full person and how can we bring flexibility into their world, in addition to all the reduced travel and commutes and other things. They're not great for the environment.
Absolutely.
And touching on that, Tsedal, how can we make this change happen? What do we need to do to really focus on the human aspects of change?
One of the biggest things that I've learned, and I've worked with several companies, helping them think about their new work models, right? It's difficult to say the future of work because it's kind of here already. You're facing it. And we're learning a lot. And the biggest lesson, frankly, is that as individuals, many people have changed. People have changed how they relate to their work and have seen that there are new possibilities in terms of how people can be productive, how they can connect, and other things. In the same way, managers, leaders, and organizations have to embrace the fact that they have changed also. People have had to adopt new cultural norms in order to function in the last 13 months, which has in some ways debunked historical arguments around what happens when you give flexibility, what happens if people work from home. All of those arguments are gone. So as we think about the future of work, I think there's going to be a lot of experimenting, but the data on this is staggering. Up to 87% of people surveyed by Gartner say they want to retain some kind of flexibility and remote work in their repertoire. Harvard Business School Online did a survey, same numbers, but a lot of companies are very nervous. 68 to 70% want more in person. They're not all thinking like Steve and Elie. And so the question is, how do we make sure that we give organizations and leaders the confidence to embrace the fact that work has shifted for many people? And the last thing I'll say here is, one of the reasons I love Atos and the work that Atos does, and I've followed it for a few years now and been a friend of the company, is that the digital revolution of work is around the corner. So I say to many people, you're worried about collaborating with Sal or Sally, you're going to be working with AI bots soon. And so the world is changing, and we need to prepare for the human loop, the machine loop, and flexibility in our repertoire.
Yeah, I mean, the expectations and demands that puts on us as business leaders to make sure that we deliver the right kind of technology and the right kind of experiences to our people. Again, given this war for talent, is just going to be more intense pressure than ever to deliver that. It should be good times for Atos, Elie.
Yeah, absolutely right for technologies as a whole, and I think rebounding on what you both said, I think also post-pandemic, we see that all the mundane tasks can be automated. And I think, as Steve was saying as well, one of our roles as leaders is to make sure that we can use automation, RPA, I mean robotization, AI, to replace those tasks and offer to our people, including our new people, jobs which are really centered and focused on what technology cannot do and will not be able to do probably in the near future. And I'm heading and leading a technology company, but I still think that there's so much that the human brains can achieve that technology will not be able to achieve. And human brains itself is evolving. So we need to be able to offer to our people all the possibilities of jobs around creativity, innovation, that algorithms can't resolve. And I think this makes our jobs exciting because we need to make our people's jobs exciting. And so we need to know where the border is between what can be made by AI and what must be made by our people. That's also one of our challenges, I think, for the post-pandemic.
How do you deal with the worry that people have that you're going to take away people's jobs if you automate or if you use RPA systems, et cetera? That's what I hear. People, you're going to take away jobs, no?
But it's a big challenge. But the whole
for the last 3 years. Been hearing that question for the last 3 years, 4 years. I think with every technology revolution, we create new jobs and we create more new jobs than are eliminated. But that's just a very quick answer. I didn't mean to cut you off, Elie. Go ahead, please.
No, I fully agree with this. I think the challenge is that it's not necessarily the same jobs. And that's why to manage to make the correspondence, it's our job as well to upskill our people, to train them so that the new jobs which are created, which are upgraded, let's say, in terms of creativity, innovation, problem solving, they can also catch those jobs and have a chance to do those jobs while they are themselves upgrading towards those jobs. But that's that's a challenge. It's not a new challenge. It's old for centuries, but it's especially now with the very fast move and acceleration of technologies. It's an accelerated challenge.
Yeah, that's why reskilling is a top agenda item with every company that we work with, and even with ourselves, of course.
Yeah.
If we can just go back to a second for talking about, care for our employees, which we were talking about earlier. It's true to say that we've seen a rise of the COVID impact, Zoom fatigue and loneliness and stress and mental issues on the rise. So, Steve, how do you see COVID reshaping mental health in the workplace?
Well, I think it's raised the profile in a way that, as horrible as it's been through COVID, I think it's been helpful to raise the profile. I mean, if I'm really honest, if I think about our businesses around the world, the ones that had active mental health programs in place for our people were ones that had a bad experience. So, for example, in Australia, we've had a very advanced mental health program for our partners and all of our staff that came out of a very unfortunate situation that we had in Australia with one of our partners, which has opened up the eyes, right, of the organization. So there's been situations like that in different countries where we had an ongoing focus, but I think COVID woke up everyone that we needed a more consistent focus. So, as you know, mental health issues are treated differently in different countries around the world, some public, some private. So there's not a sort of one size fits all, but we've instituted programs across the world, country by country. Things like Thrive Global would be one example. For example, Mind Beacon's another one. So different vendors that we're working with. We've also been very active on trying to set boundaries and working with our people on setting boundaries. That's harder, easier said than done, I should say. But we've worked very hard to do it. We've given more time off. So for example, this week in the U.S., we normally have, I think, Friday off as a holiday. We now have Thursday and Friday off, and the whole 4th of July week in the U.S. is a holiday, and there's been similar accommodations in other countries around the world. So, trying to do as much as we can to really, help people take the time they need, and to provide the support they need. And we put together a global SharePoint site where we're accumulating all of our best practices around the world around this topic. One thing is for sure, though, as we come out of the pandemic into whatever hybrid model we come into, productivity will decline. Right? There is no way our people can keep working as hard as they've worked, and I think any organization would tell you that through the pandemic, because as hard as we've tried, right, to instill those boundaries, productivity has just been at record levels.
I call that hyper productivity, by the way. Productivity gone wrong, where people are getting burned out, stressed out. And what we found is that people are on average working 6.8 hours more per week, and replacing some of the commute time that they've lost with more work. So individual managers have to actually be involved in not only setting the right examples. You can't send emails at all hours of the night and weekends and telling people, come on, recalibrate. You've got to model the behavior that you want to see, but you also have to help people dial it down because we're seeing people getting burned out.
And it's interesting, Tsedal. I mean, I've been spending the pandemic in the U.S. where I was normally be spending more time in Europe. If I'm talking to someone in, say, the UK or France about an issue and it's 2 or 3 p.m. New York time, I'll say, let's stop and pick it up tomorrow. Or, and the resistance on that, even, from the people I'm dealing with, oh, no, it's fine. We can do it now. We can do it. No, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night for you. You need to relax, have some time with your family. It's been harder than you would think to get people to really establish those boundaries.
Because it's a culture change.
So another question that we haven't answered yet about hybrid working and psychological safety, which is one of the strongest proven predictors of team effectiveness, that I'd like to ask Tsedal. How can leaders approach psychological safety differently when considering remote and hybrid teams?
Great question. So first of all, psychological safety is really defined as the ability to voice what's on your mind without worrying about penalties or punishments. It's also the ability to make mistakes, and that's okay. So it's essentially the experience that you can contribute to the team, to the group, without worrying about your job security through mistakes and other things. And so one of the things that's really important to make explicit and to establish is how are we going to work together and what are the norms in our group, and to repeatedly do this. We call these launches and relaunches. We talked about how do you launch your new work model, but there's actually an active set of practices that you need to do on a periodic basis, 6 to 8 weeks, to make sure that people are on the same page, not only about how are we going to work together, but how do we make sure that everyone can contribute freely without feeling that they can get penalized.
It's true. It's all a transformation journey, really, which many organisations find themselves on. So, question for you, Steve: what do organisations need to do to make this change happen in a joined-up way?
That is a very tough question. But I think what they have to do really is it gets down to communication first and foremost. I think one thing that maybe some organizations did better than others, and I'd say the more successful did well, was really communicating strongly with the people at all levels during the pandemic, and ensuring that concepts like that Tsedal just mentioned, like being able to trust that it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to to try to do something a little bit differently as you're working on your own, and so I think. Encouraging that, right, through broader communications, through all of your, however your organization cascades, whether it's counseling families or whether it's your different reporting levels throughout the organization. I think making it clear that we have some financial wiggle room, if you will, for some of these mistakes, and actually. Giving people some funds to invest, which is something that we've done, during the pandemic, and ensuring that that we're rewarding appropriately. Rewards is also a key part of this, and making sure that we've got adequate funds and principles in terms of how we reward people, and sometimes even rewarding them when they do make mistakes, because the intent was good and the initiative was right, and maybe it's just a slightly different answer that we wind up implementing.
And another question now on leadership this time, which I'd like to ask Elie. In your opinion, what is the new role of leadership in this new world of work?
Well, I would focus maybe on three topics which are more values almost. Number one, and we touched upon them again, engagement. I think we need to engage our people. It sounds like a word and easy, but we all know what it means. Their engagement was natural in the middle of the crisis, the pandemic. We need to keep this level of engagement, even increase it if possible, outside of the war. And that's much tougher than in the middle of the war, if I may say. And engagement as a notion as a goal for the leaders and the leadership of companies, I think, must replace productivity. And in a way, productivity will be a consequence. But if we have our people engaged, again, they will give the best of what a human being, the human brains can give, which is this innovation, this creativity, this problem solving. And productivity will be not secondary, but it will come afterwards. So engagement. Second is empowerment. We talked about it as well. And as I said earlier, we've got the tools to empower our people, even technological tools, to empower our people much more. And that will feed the engagement itself. And the third is mental health. Talked about it with my two friends here. It's inevitable, unavoidable to have an increase of mental issues throughout the crisis, but also when returning to work. We all, so many studies have shown that and are showing that now, that returning to work is going to generate and is already generating some psychological issues. And we need to be prepared for that, and we need to take care of this. This is extremely important. And those three notions go all together, I think. So as leaders, that these are, there are many other topics, but these are the ones I would select. But I'm sure Steve and Tsedal have.
I agree 100%, Elie. We refer to that as transformative leadership. Everything you just described in terms of innovation, understanding, caring. This point you raised about returning to the office, though, and the stress around that, I think, is a really important one as well. I mean, one of the challenges of the pandemic was there was no phase-in period, right? It just hit us immediately. You had to transition how you work immediately, and that was a shock to the system. And I think as we look at returning to work, returning to the office, we have the opportunity to phase this in a way that it's not as disruptive and disturbing to our people. And that's why I think you see a lot of companies, again, depending on where different countries are at the stage of the pandemic, but you see companies, for example, in places like the US and UK, talking about a gradual return to work on some kind of a hybrid model, a soft launch almost, if you will, over the summer, then getting into September, maybe with more of a harder launch into the new hybrid model. But I think it's important that we take the time to not just create an immediate change for people.
Absolutely.
Well, we've just got a few minutes left. I just want to say, firstly, thank you to all of our three speakers. It's been a really interesting session for me. I've learnt a lot. And just one last question to all three of you, in fact. Let's start with Tsedal. That's what, in your view, is the most important action for organizations to take to rebound strongly?
I think it's to lead courageously and to understand that people have transformed, individuals have transformed, work has transformed, ecosystems have transformed, and to look forward and not backward and take some of the best lessons that we've taken through this terrible crisis around not only the human spirit, but how to rethink work arrangements so that we're not only keeping people engaged, but also bringing in people who are excited to be with us, and also increasing our diversity by accessing talent in ways that we never had before. We have so many more pipes available to us, but with more diversity, we also need to work hard to create cultures where people feel they can thrive. And I think this is where we are today.
So, same question to you, Steve, if I may.
So the great thing about going second is I can offer. Tsedal's answer was great, and I'll bank that one and say I agree with it, and I can offer another one. I think this focus on employee experience is going to be more important than ever before. And you've heard a lot of people say over the last few years, that the data, is the new oil. Well, I would argue that talent and the experiences that we're delivering to our people, that's the new oil of today. So, companies that haven't thought about that as proactively and aggressively, I think are going to have to change their mindset and just understand that this new way of working is going to cause the business to interact with employees in a much different way. And employees are going to see us, all of us, right, through that lens of technology, function, infrastructure that they might be working with at any point in time. So I think it's all about experience.
Well, as I'm going third, I agree with both of you. I really agree with everything you said here. I would only add, I guess, that we're going from an employee experience to an engaged employee experience, and this is really our challenge for the rebound. And from a work perspective, because this is the question, the best to rebound is to have very accurate and acute consciousness as leaders that we need to bring this engaged employee experience to our people.
Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be able to join our next session. That's with me, Robert Versoyon, who's our EVP and Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences and Unified Communications at Atos, and our other guests and experts at 3:30 p.m. CET.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tsedal. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.